Welcome to If Only You Knew, where each week we take a deep dive into the careers and experiences of people from different backgrounds, cultures, countries and ages to discuss pivotal moments in their lives and the lessons they have learnt along the way.
If they told people the truth, they wouldn't last very long.
Whether you're a school student in an established career, mapping your academic pathway, searching for the perfect career, looking to change careers, or just plain curious, then this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Christy McCormack, and I want to ask you, what would you do differently if only you knew? I have two guests with me today just to change things up. Their journeys have been very different, yet with many similarities. A shared desire to put life before work has seen them spend the past 12 months or so traveling, which is what first piqued my interest. But how they came to that decision is why I'm so keen to talk with them today. So welcome, Jenn and Mitch.
Oh, thanks so much, Christy. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's great to come along and share our journey along and reminisce ourselves, actually.
We love what you're doing with the podcast, so it's great to be involved.
Perfect. Thank you. So in the lead up to today, I asked you guys just to give me a little bit of a glimpse into who you guys are. What you sent me was just absolutely amazing, and you've got incredible stories to tell. So I am really keen and really excited to talk with you because there's been so many twists and turns and I think lessons learned that you'll be able to share with the listeners. So I'll jump straight in and ask Jenn. You both spent a lot of time at university and both did degrees that sounds like you weren't overly happy with. And Jenn, you went from wanting to study architecture to actually studying psychology, HR, and now you work for Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, supporting young professionals. So how did that happen? How did you first get into your initial degree?
It's funny, actually, when we think about it, when you say the architecture piece, it seems like such a long time ago where that was something that I was, pursuing, because, as you say, life has changed so much since that moment. I think architecture for me was because I was good at it at school. And when you don't really know anything else, you kind of just gravitate towards, oh, this thing seems like a great opportunity. Let's do that. And then it kind of worked out that the university that offered what I really wanted to do within architecture was far away. And I started to be a bit afraid, I guess, of moving away from home so quickly. So then I started doing tried to think about other things because everyone's asking you to think about it, what you want to do with your life. And I didn't really know. I became a little bit unwell. And then I had a very close friend, my cousin actually, who had mental illness. And I thought, you know what, I want to be able to help her. So let's do psychology. Unfortunately, she passed away quite early in my degree. And I realized that it's a very tough thing to do, to work within psychology. And it wasn't something that I thought that personally I had the capability at that time to be able to put at the door and go home and go on living, my life. So about 6 months into my degree, I thought, oh, this isn't the right thing for me, but I didn't know what else to do. So I just kept going. and I thought, my mother would probably be extremely disappointed in me if I didn't come out the other side with a degree. So I just kind of kept pursuing it until I finished a degree that I knew that I didn't want to pursue as my career, but without having anything better to put in its place, I just continued on.
Did you find, though, that there was nobody to really support you through those decisions at university? Like, was there anybody there to sort of, for you to be able to say, this is really not for me, what else can I do?
In my first degree, I don't think that I utilised the services at university as well as I could have. There are so many people there that are there to support you. And it's not just your lecturers or your tutors. There is a myriad of careers team members. Having then later down the track worked in the careers team at a university, I was just blown away by the services that I, for whatever reason, didn't know existed. And I think part of that comes from being first in family to go to uni. No one in my circle, my parents, none of them had been to uni. So no one had that knowledge to share with me to say there are people to go and talk to. At that point, Mitch was ambling through his degree as well.
It's true.
Being very honest, darling. it was really only Mitch that was doing a degree as well. And the same thing, he didn't really know and utilise the services that were there. So while there are, I didn't really know, and I didn't reach out to that support.
So Mitch, you, I suppose, you self-admit that you idled through high school.
Yes.
And then you enrolled in a biotechnology innovation degree, and you changed degrees a lot. So was that as well because you just didn't, it just wasn't for you? Like what you thought that you wanted to do when you left school just wasn't a good fit once you sort of grew into being a young adult?
A little bit. So I went into the biotechnology degree having read a lot of sci-fi and living the big dreams of human augmentation and genetic engineering and all of the big sci-fi dreams, I guess, when it comes to organic sciences. And I got to university, and looking back at it now, two things happened. One, I realised that we weren't there with the science. We just were not there at that time. We hadn't discovered CRISPR. We haven't discovered a heap of new techniques that we've discovered in the last decade since I was at university. So when I went in, they were talking about opportunities studying proteins from cows. And I was like, this isn't what I want to be doing at all to really live that dream that I was pursuing. The other thing I realized was it wasn't a cakewalk. It was not easy. I rolled through biological sciences and chemistry, etc. at high school, had no issues at all. Hit university and really struggled my first semester. Second semester, I went into it with eyes a bit wide, and kind of just got waylaid. And I was also experiencing at the time, because QUT had a really good biotechnology lab and everything like that, but it was old. And so I was kind of spending all my time in these old labs, etc., and going, I don't like being in here. I don't like being in this lab, and I can't imagine being in here 40, 50 hours a week. I'm looking at some of the postgrad students who literally had beds set up so they could, in the lab hallways, so that they could look after their experiments while they're doing their postgrads and that kind of thing, going, I don't want that. Yeah. So that was my first year. And then second year, I changed degrees. I went into dual degree business and psychology. I'd been watching Jenn do her psych and decided that it was interesting and that I'd give it a go. And went along that path for a while. And then, so that was probably about 3 years I did that for. And then realized that I wasn't getting particularly closer to finishing my dual degree. It was still a long way to go, and I was starting to really struggle being at university and not being out doing things. Our friendship circles at the time, no one else really went to university. So all of our friends were in trades or working full-time jobs. They all had money. They all had social lives. They weren't struggling to get by week to week. They didn't have to live on a tight budget or anything like that. And
I think also they didn't understand what it's like to study at university, and the time that if you're at home is spent studying as well. So they were there was a lot of pressure there to go and do things. And which is very distracting from a degree which you're already struggling in as it is.
So by the time I got to that point, I had realised that you could go and talk to unit coordinators and counsellors and that kind of thing. So I went and talked to my unit coordinator, course coordinator for my psychology degree, and said, can I finish? How can I finish this as quickly as possible? And she said, we'll drop the business degree. We'll take as many units as we can. And we sat down for about half an hour, worked it out, and realised I needed to do 3 more units to graduate. And that's literally the only reason I graduated in the end. If I hadn't had that very short timeline in front of me, and it was 7 months to get it done, I wouldn't have finished uni, just because it just seemed so insurmountable by the end to get it all done.
So why do you think it was so hard? And do you think that conversation was paramount to you being able to just move on from university?
It definitely was very important for me to move on. The reason I ended up, and this is a lot of introspection later, I think part of the reason I struggled at university, and every other time I've attempted to do further education since, I don't do well as an auditory learner. So I've learned a lot about how I can learn and how personally I can grow and absorb knowledge. And sitting through a lecture does not work well for me. I just can't do it. I get 15 minutes in and start phasing out, get distracted by my phone or my laptop or something that's going on around me, and that's the end of it, and I'm not paying attention. And I walk out 2 hours later going, oh, what did we learn today?
I think if I can add on, just so Mitch and I have been together throughout this entire journey. We started our relationship when we were 14. So we went through the ups and the downs all together. And I think part of it was what Mitch mentioned earlier around the fact that he had all of these really exciting dreams that had come from books and movies about what a certain career path or a life path could look like. And then when the expectations didn't match with the reality, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And there was nothing to fill it.
Takes a lot of wind out of your sails. When I finished high school, I had dreams of being able to go buy a house in a few years. I had a Cert 4 in fitness. I expected to go be a very successful PT while also doing university and just having everything sorted. And from day one, none of those dreams really came true. I'd been sold on my PT course. I went and tried 5 jobs at PT. I ended up spending 2 mornings a week handing out brochures for a gym. That was the work that I got off the back of that, because I was a 17-year-old who wasn't in particularly great shape, who had a rushed Cert 4. So I definitely got sold a little bit on that, and spent some very cold mornings in front of the Central Station in Brisbane handing out flyers. So yeah, it took a long time to kind of move past what I thought I should have achieved or should be able to achieve in life in general, not just study. That was definitely an expectation was put on me, I think, by society, or that I grew from society, that I should be able to be this successful and do all these different things. And it just wasn't the right path for me in the end.
I think, Jen, that's one of the things that you raised, was there was so much pressure on you at high school to succeed and to go down a particular path. Now, you work now with young professionals and you have worked a lot with high schoolers. What's your advice to them with regards to the expectation and the actual reality of life?
When I go to high schools now, and it's been a few months now, but when I go out to schools and I talk to students and I see the same pressures that are facing them that I felt, some don't, depending on the school and the environment and the parents and your peers, you can have a really well-rounded expectation of the fact that, okay, I might have an idea or I might not, and that's okay. But I find the vast majority is that because everyone's talking about it, talking about the fact that you have to know what your next step is, that it seems bigger than Ben-Hur. And I think that a lot of people, and I want to use the term, the grown-ups or the adults, a lot of the time we don't mean to put those pressures on students or to make them feel like it is a do or die situation, or you need to have your whole career mapped out for yourself now, when potentially someone might actually be referring to just understanding enough to be able to take the next step and to move forward in a journey. But when you're potentially feeling like you don't know what you want to do at all, it can become very, very overwhelming. And for me, that was very much the case for me, because I'd always been quite academically inclined throughout school. And I was told, similar to Mitch, that I was quite intelligent and that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And this is a little bit before that started to be honed in all aspects of life across social media and things like that, because we were a little bit before social media really took off. But so I was being told by my teachers, my parents' friends, that I could do a lot. And then when you just don't know exactly what that is and what's going to drive you and make you happy and fulfill your passion, it does become very all-encompassing. And when I'm talking to students and I'm trying to share that journey back, it's a lot about saying to someone to think about what it is that you're interested in, what brings you joy, what do you want to spend your time on, because a job or a career is something that you spend a lot of time in, and that can make it really scary. But at the same time, it's like, well, what can I actually link some of the things that I love doing day to day with what I want to do as a career or as a job? So what are my motivations? What are my end goals in life? And how can that tie together? And sometimes it's not what we know.
That was actually a really important learning for me myself. I had to realize what I felt accomplishment from. So if I sat down and did something very abstract, or I only got a piece of something done for 6 hours worth of work, I never felt accomplished. I need to see an end result to feel accomplished with my output. That can be from many different things. I spent some time mowing lawns for a job, and at the end of mowing a lawn, seeing a nice, clean, smooth lawn, I felt very accomplished. Mowing lawns, in comparison to, studying biotechnology, it was a very, very vastly different field. But I know that that's something I need now to enjoy a job, to enjoy a hobby, to enjoy anything. If I don't have that sense of accomplishment, then it's not something worth me pursuing.
And I think that is really hard, especially now when there is so much instant gratification. So we game in terms of board games and video games and computer games, and we've always kind of we've always done that. Console games as well. We used to do console games instead of sport. I don't know how our school allowed that.
There's swindling going on there.
Yeah, our parents had to sign waivers, so I don't know what was going on there, Mum. But even more than what we had, now there is so much instant gratification. You put a photo up on Instagram, you get a like, or whatever it is. That time frame to achieve something, you build this, again, expectation that things are going to come a lot quicker than they do. And then all of a sudden, an end goal of even completing one unit at university is 6 months, and it's over there somewhere, like far off in the distance.
And after your first semester, you realise that finishing one unit is only a small brick in the path. And you go, oh, that's a long way to go.
And so when people start to think about this, they start to realise, oh gosh, that's quite a long journey that I'm undertaking. I think it becomes this self-fulfilling cycle of anxiety where it might be like, okay, there's even more pressure that I get it right then, because I'm locking myself into a really long time, and it's going to be so long before I get there. I've got to make sure that it's the right thing that I'm putting my time and energy into. And without spoilering further ahead and things that we might discuss, I think that that's a really dangerous idea to have, that you are locked into something, because so many people change, and that was us. We changed through so many degrees and so many different career aspirations, and we're both happy where we are now, and that's not where we were thinking we would be when we were in school or at the start of university.
That's exactly why I started this podcast, because I have a son who's just started university, and I was that parent that was like, you need to go to university, you need to. I made him do a diploma of business while he was doing year 12, not realizing that he already had enough points to graduate in year 11. So I was, push. And then he enrolled in his degree, and he said, what job am I going to do when I finish this? And I couldn't give that answer. I was like, I've got no idea, like what that's actually going to give you from what they tell you in a brochure to reality. Now on reflection, it's difficult, because he's done one semester and he's like, I want to change degrees. And I'm freaking out as a mother, saying, oh my goodness, you want to change degrees? He's like, no. But then from talking to so many people, it's probably best that I just go and do what you need to do. So I think this needs to be, from my perspective, a little more support for parents as well through high school, because the world has changed. There's so many different opportunities now. So what would you say to the schools with regards to supporting parents through those sort of choices and those sort of pressures?
I think so. My next brother down is actually in the same kind of situation. He's in his first year of university and considering leaving uni and doing a trade, and I fully support it. The big thing, I guess, is that we have this expectation that university is best. And it can be. It can be, but there are a lot of graduates out there slinging coffee professionally as well. I think what schools could be doing to support parents in particular is explaining how there's so many pathways. People don't understand that an OP of one, when you finish year 12, is not the only way to get into university. It's not the only way to become a doctor. It's not the only way to become an engineer. And it doesn't have to happen immediately after high school. You could take 10 years off and come back and enroll in university, and there's no issue whatsoever. And parents obviously want the best for their kids. It's fairly instinctual to always be pursuing that. But just keep in mind that there's many ways to get there, and there's many different things that are the best for the kids.
I just wanted to know, did your parents support you when you guys changed degrees? Because you did have a few changes through university. So did you have the support of your parents, or were they a little bit reluctant to support you in that journey?
It's interesting. Like, my parents are very supportive. To this day, my dad still sends me job applications and says, "Oh, there's a great job going over here. You know, let's give this a go."
They were concerned.
They were concerned, but overall, they were okay with the fact that I was still at uni and working towards finishing a degree. Neither of them had degrees. They grew up as farmers. They worked as farmers. That's changed now. But they were very much go to university. They very much wanted me to do that. They wanted to see that change. And they feel the same way for my brothers now. But they have definitely, I can see the differences now compared to when I went to university. They're much more supportive of other options because I've seen the path that I've gone through and how I've chopped and changed, and how university didn't immediately work out for me. It didn't put me into an 80 grand a year job or anything like that. So they're much more open overall, but very much you got to do something, which is, I think, the most important message that a parent can give to their kids is don't feel like it's hopeless, just do something.
Continue learning and growing and building those transferable skills. And within universities, depending on what you have studied, there are a lot of opportunities to credit some of the things that you've done. So it's not wasted time. And I think that's a big fear that I've already sunk 6 months into this degree and now I don't know that this is what I want to do. But if I do something else, then I've just wasted 6 months of my life. And I would encourage parents as well as students themselves to think about that time as learning how to learn at whatever it is, whether that be university or outside, but also the fact that potentially it could actually credit. And sometimes they credit things that don't necessarily think that they're going to. So there are always kind of options if you're taking the opportunity to talk with all of the people that are out there to talk to. And a lot of those services, particularly things like career services within universities or your course coordinators, they are free. It's not like you've got to go out and go find a career counsellor or a life coach outside of the bubble that you're already in. A lot of them are an opportunity there. To answer your question earlier, Christy, about the support of my parents, I think my mum would have been supportive, I think, but I was too terrified to find out. So I just soldiered through because, again, coming back to the fact that I knew that degree would at least give me skills. It would at least give me knowledge that I didn't have before. And particularly with psychology, you're pretty much always going to be dealing with people in some form. So in that sense, I knew that things that I learned would be probably relevant at some point, I hoped. Although when I was sitting in lectures where they were talking about the history of how a particular theory of psychology came to be, I was like, this is not going to be relevant ever. There were moments. Yeah, I think that continual thinking about it as in a pathway and a things to build on, skills to grow from, without being overly stressed, I guess, about the fact that it's wasted time is a really good way of looking at it. in terms of schools and parents, I actually think it's a step back from that, where schools can be investing time to support their own, because most schools, nearly all of them, I believe, have to have a guidance counsellor. So those guidance counsellors, the time that they are given for professional development as well, to be able to go out and hear about all the different things. I think you mentioned earlier about potentially new jobs, different things that are going on. There are new roles and jobs being created every year. Brand new things that people have never had an actual career or a job in before. We can only imagine what that's going to look like, what the landscape of jobs are going to look like in 5 years or 10 years down the track, particularly if we have guidance counsellors that have never done any professional development or growth or looking into what the new career opportunities are right now. There might be a gap in what potential future looks like for these students when they get out of, because by the time they get out of university, potentially it's 3 to 5 years down the track anyway. So the landscape will look very different. So I think that growth mindset for schools, guidance counsellors, and people that are providing support to students and parents both, to take that almost grain of salt approach that things are going to change. That's just the certainty of life is change, will be very helpful, I believe, and that there are always options, and particularly in a university environment, there is so much support.
That's what I sort of struggle with respect to the people that are advising, that, parents, we're not necessarily the best placed people to be advising, because, we have sort of tunnel vision of what we didn't do and what we wish that they would do. And I think as well, with what you touched on with the careers advisors, a lot of them haven't really experienced much outside of that institutional environment. Mm-hmm. So we're expecting them to guide these children that can now make careers out of social media or out of pretty much anything that they want to do. You can make a job out of it these days. Yeah. So it's hard to sort of change that mind shift. Mm. But Mitch, you did mention in your email that you sort of felt that you had wasted sort of 7 years. Do you really think that?
Ultimately, no. It got me where I am. So I can't really begrudge that. I do see a lot of opportunities that I wasn't aware enough to pursue at the time, which I guess is probably the thing that I feel I wasted. I made contact with mentors at different points in time. I had different job offers, etc. And I just never really pursued those options the way, looking back, I should have. So I had an option to go and do an internship with Department of Main Roads. Now, I have no idea if I would have ended up enjoying that role, but instead of going and doing it for 6 weeks, I went and mowed lawns so that I had enough money to go on a holiday. And the holiday was fundamentally important. That set the path for where we went, where we are now. That was our very first trip away together. And it was very
formative
for us. Yes, absolutely. It definitely changed our ethos a little bit. But at the same time, I go, well, that was when I was 22. If I'd gone into a good corporate environment and had a good experience, what else would have changed? Would I have gone into a full-time role shortly afterwards? Would I have, progressed up through different things and come out with an extra degree that I had support doing, or who knows what? And there's been a couple of different instances through my life where I've been in the right moment and taken a choice that on hindsight probably wasn't the optimal one. And that's really hard to see in the moment. I obviously failed a few times. It is what it is, and that's kind of learning and making sure that you actually take the time to think back through your life and consider the moments that you've had and the choices you've made and learn from them. If you don't ever think about your history, you just repeat the same thing over again. So it's not wasted time. It's taught me a great deal about myself, and it's taught me a great deal about being aware of the world around me. And it's helped me get to the point I am where I'm more concerned with living rather than working or earning, I should say. But it wasn't the outcome I was expecting. And I guess that's carrying over from that 20-year-old me. 20-year-old me expected great things from 30-year-old me. And I've done great things, but they are very different to what I expected I would do. And so there's always that little bit of a juxtaposition in just your own psyche.
So I think you mentioned that you lasted 3 weeks in the corporate world. I found that extremely interesting and did have a bit of a giggle out loud when I read that. So what happened with that?
I got a job with a recruitment agency. I was finishing my degree, my psychology degree, and got a job. They were very keen to take me on. They offered me, looking back now, an absurdly low amount per year to work with them. And I jumped on it because I'm like, oh, excellent, I've got a job. That's the goal, isn't it? And started working with them. And on the first day, realized that they expected 60-hour work weeks. And I wasn't keen for that. I had a life to live. I wanted to go play video games. I wanted to spend time with my wife. I wasn't the classic, or maybe I was, but I wasn't the normal 23-year-old who just wanted to put their nose to the grindstone. So that kind of caused problems straight away because I wanted to leave at 5 p.m. when my contract said I was meant to leave. They weren't paying me to be there until 8 p.m. And in my mind, that was as simple as it was. So that was kind of a problem there to begin with. And then there were other issues as we went along. But what it really came down to was I spent the first 2 weeks working with them. And when I actually got recruited, I told them explicitly I had to take a week off to do my last university unit. I had an intensive unit to do. It was a full week's worth of work from 8 till 5. And I had to get it done to get my degree. And at the time, they were perfectly fine about it. I got to mid in my second week and said, hey, I've got just reminding you, I'm going to be away next week. And they weren't happy about that at all. And they're like, oh, you didn't tell us, you haven't given us any notice, we can't do that, et cetera, And I said, well, I'm sorry, but this is my priority, is getting a degree overall. And they were ups and downs about it, but it was what it was. I went and did that week. During that time, Jenn got a upset wisdom tooth. And she went through the whole process of seeing the dentist and everything like that. And so come Monday morning on my third actual week at work, Jenn had an appointment for that Friday to go and get her wisdom teeth removed.
I think it was actually an emergency.
Yeah, emergency removal.
Yeah.
So it was all very sudden because it was infected and they're fighting with antibiotics and everything like that, but had to be done. So I came in Monday morning and said, I've got to go and pick up my other half on Friday. And that means I'm going to have to drop her off and then pick her up. And that means I can come in for a little while in the morning, and then I got to run her to the hospital, and I want to be there because it's the first time she's had surgery and all this kind of stuff. And I want to be there to take her home and look after her. And they're like, oh yeah, okay. But weren't particularly happy about that again. And that for me was a very large red flag, because the most important thing in my life was Jenn. A job means nothing in comparison to looking after Jenn. And the fact that they thought that coming in and working for them was more important than looking after Jenn was a really big no for me. So we got to Friday, Thursday afternoon, and I said, I won't be here for a little bit in the morning tomorrow, and then I'll run out and I can come back late in the afternoon. Again, very grudging, but yes, okay. I went and did that. I came back in the afternoon, walked into the office about 3 p.m. and the office manager called me over and said, I think we might have a problem, a differing opinion on what we think. And I said, yeah, are you about to fire me? And they're like, yeah, I think so, unless we can change something. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I quit. Thank you. Goodbye. And that was the end of my corporate career, because I just was very turned off by that attitude that the only thing that mattered was them.
I think it's really a shame that, you can have these single people have such an influence on your life.
Absolutely.
And I think, Jenn, you mentioned that you had a sort of similar experience with somebody telling you that don't go into accounting because you'll be bored.
Yeah.
And so then you decided to study HR, and now you work for Chartered Accountants Australia. so, you know, that person to you, were they that influential, or were you just undecided, and because somebody said no, probably not best fit for you, you changed paths?
Yeah, that's actually a really great way to pose that question, Christy. So this person was someone I'd known for a while. She was working within the accounting space, so I thought if anyone was to know, then it's going to be her. And it was just such a dismissive conversation. It was very, no, this isn't right for you, because I think she looked at me and said, look, you're, you know, an outgoing type of person, you're a people person, you studied psychology, this isn't where you're going to go. So to put that in context, it was directly after the end of my psychology bachelor where I was like, I still don't know what I'm doing with my life. And I was like, okay, I'll go back to university and I'll study a master's. And I was pouring over all of the course curriculum books, being like, something's got to jump out at me. My mum was in aged care, and I knew that wasn't where I wanted to go. And my father was a World War II vet. He didn't have a career at that time. And Mitch's parents were farmers, and they were doing stuff in real estate. I'm like, none of those things are what I wanted to do. So I didn't know what to do. Went through all the books and picked the two that were just so exciting for me, that really stood out to me. And I went, okay, HR sounds fantastic because it really links with what I'd been doing in psychology, but from an organizational perspective. And accounting sounds fantastic because I love data, I love numbers, I love understanding how businesses work through their financials. And so I'm like, okay, these two sound fantastic. And Mitch's mum said, yeah, he would be great in HR. And then this other person came in, and I thought, I'll ask them because I know that that's the space they work in. And she was just like, no, this is not for you. Don't do it. And I felt disappointment, but I ultimately, for whatever reason, decided that I just had to take her at her word, and I just had to trust what she'd said to me, this one person. And that changed the course of my, you know, the next few years of my life completely, from studying accounting to not, by one person's dismissive comment. And in hindsight, that just seems so crazy, like absolutely nuts. But at the time, I didn't really have that much else to go on, and I just wholeheartedly trusted that. And like you said, I studied my HR degree through a couple of those moments in life where it's serendipitous. I ended up working in a careers team at university. And then my biggest client, so I was an employer liaison, so connecting employers with students. And the industry that I worked with the most was accounting, seconded by engineering. And so I was always working with the grad recruiters for these big accounting organizations. And I loved them. I loved what they'd talk about. I'd sit in the presentations and I'd listen, and it started to be, it made me really sad sometimes listening to it. I could have been doing this. I could have been one of those grads that was sitting there ready to, you know, put in my application to one of these firms. And then because I was doing so much in that space, I ended up being, when the role at CA came up, the person who was in the role before me reached out and said, hey, would you like to consider this role? And so it was very much, I almost fell into these roles via networks. And that became just such a big piece of how I ended up where I am now, and being able to go and tell stories like this to students and say, look, you know, maybe don't trust just one person. Maybe have a little bit of education around it and think about it and how it connects with you. And I mean, the thing with accounting in particular is the fact that there is a different type of accounting for different people. But that's true of so many different industries as well, that you might read something about a career in engineering and go, maybe that's not for me. But there are so many different avenues of engineering that you can go down. And so I know now, looking back, that person gave me that piece of advice with all the love in the world, but it was a very particular part. She knew that I probably wasn't going to be a very good tax accountant, which is what she did a lot of. She did a lot of bookkeeping and tax as well. But I might actually really enjoy something like insolvency or forensics and something a little bit different. So there's always nuances to the advice people give you. And always, I still firmly believe that everyone should take advice on board and listen to them, especially when people are trying to give it to you with genuine care, but also still be doing that. We have so much access to the internet and to counsellors and to support parents and all of the people around us, that if you ask for help and ask for that advice, you can start to build a better picture rather than just from one person.
Well, two things I want to mention off that. First of all, Jen says serendipitous, but what it really was is putting herself out there. She developed a network from being helpful, being open, and it started off with you just walking past a careers fair and helping pick something up. That was literally just being a good person and giving a hand. So don't undervalue those things, because that's how you maintain and build a network, is by being out there. If you just sit at home, you're never going to build a network. If you don't ever talk to someone, you're never going to build a network. And it's a problem that I see people run into all the time. They're like, I have skills, but how do I ever advertise that? I'm like, well, who are you talking to about it? Have you got a mentor? Have you gone and talked to someone on Reddit about the different things that you could be doing with your degree or anything like that? And that kind of flows into the second thing, is the fact that I think there's a very big void at the moment in our education system and just how we raise people, young adults, that doesn't teach a lot of very fundamental life skills. And I'm not talking about how to clean the dishes, but things like doing fact checking, how to do some basic research on things, how to go and find different opinions. And that's more important than ever with everything that's going on with social media. But also things like learning how you learning what makes you procrastinate and what doesn't, what's your flow state when you work, all those fundamental skills that we have so much information about nowadays, but you just don't know them. No one brings them up, and they're the difference between being an average person and an achieving person, to put it bluntly. If you start to understand those things about yourself, then you can do a lot more.
That's a really good point. At Chartered Accountants Australia, New Zealand, where I'm working now, part of becoming a professional accountant is that you have to do a bit more study. Like you have to do more study with us. And one of the things that I talk to people about the most is the fact that it is quite different to how you've studied at high school and how you've studied at university. And there is a lot of responsibility placed on you as an individual to figure out what it is that makes you learn, because otherwise you're off there by yourself and you've just got to somehow succeed and get through it. And for some people, it is working with other people and getting that social pressure of someone else saying, don't forget, you've got to study this particular concept. Whereas then other people, it's, no, I just need a structured, rigorous time every night that I go and I stick my head in a book and then I write out all my notes. And that's my way of working. And that's different to my best friend. And that's great. That's fine. But yeah, learning how you learn is fundamental to then being able to progress. But that applies all the way back to deciding what it is that you want to do with the next job or your career or your study. It's taking a second to figure out how you most absorb information so that you can make those decisions yourself. And that's right for you as an individual.
Absolutely. I think, only you can know you deep down, and only you can put yourself out there. And I think, Jen, you put yourself out there with your employer by approaching them about going on a holiday while still working for them. And I believe you're the first person to be able to do that. That, we obviously at the very moment with COVID, like there's a lot of people working from home, but before then that wasn't really a thing that companies did, especially if someone's traveling abroad. So how did that come about and how did you make it work?
It's really funny. I was actually talking to at the time, He was my sort of group executive or general manager. And he's like, I don't even know why I approved that, Jen. My organisation is quite a traditional organisation, and we are, I think that's why I've been there for so long now. I've been here for six years. I love the environment. I love the culture. And I love that. And we do try very much to have flexibility and support. And again, like you said, this is all pre-COVID because everything's changed as of now. But before that, there was a lot of rigor and a lot of traditionalism around being in the office because we are member facing. So we have people that rely on us as to be there for them. And especially with my role, at the time, I was very much, I need to be on university campuses. I need to be going and seeing employers in their workplaces. So very physical based as opposed to being particularly desk or administrative. So I think that made it even more challenging. Ultimately, and it's kind of awkward for me because I'm not someone who likes to kind of toot my own horn or pat myself on the back. So it's a bit awkward for me, but I think it was the fact that I was in a role that I enjoyed, so it made it easy for me to work hard and put the effort in and I think do a good job at what I was doing. And so then when the time rolled around where a few things had happened in life, where my mother had been very sick, so she'd gone through 2 back-to-back different cancers, and I'd spent a lot of time still putting in just as much effort at work because I had these people that I genuinely wanted to support and I didn't want to let my work slip, but I was also caring for my mum, so I was like working from the hospital and things like that. And I think that was something that my employer appreciated, I guess, and they looked at that and went, okay, yeah. And then by the time that I came out the other side of that, and things were because it'd been a couple of years at that point, it was starting to drag on me professionally and personally. I was starting to burn out a little bit. I was tired. And when I said, look, I need just like it's a little bit tired.
It was more than a little bit.
But I didn't know because that's the thing, when you are enjoying what you're doing and it is meaningful for you, it is sometimes harder to realize that you are burning out. But that's a whole different discussion. But I think because I put that effort in, it was a lot easier to have a discussion with my organisation when I needed to take a bit of a break and do something differently. And so I didn't really know what would happen when I asked them for that time away. But for whatever reason, I thought that was really important to me. And Mitch mentioned it earlier, we went away on a 4-week holiday 2010 or 2011. And that was a really, really big moment for us because we loved being out. We loved exploring and enjoying and learning about new cultures and new people and languages. And I felt like the best version of myself when I was out and about and challenging myself in ways that are so different to the way that you work, especially for me in a corporate world where there's a lot of there is a lot of rigor. So I felt like that was what exactly I needed at the time, was something completely different from what I'd been doing. And so I thought, okay, like I really need to do this, but I don't know what's going to happen with my employer. And I love them and I love working for CA. And so it was a very difficult conversation. And I ultimately just tried to be as honest as possible to say, I need a break. I need to go away. But I don't want to quit. I really love working. What happens now? And they were amazing. And I had a really supportive management team, a really supportive HR team, and they just helped me to create contracts to be able to go away and figure out what that meant for my role. Putting it on hold, we treated it in some ways like I don't know, actually, I probably should have checked what I could and couldn't say about this with HR. But we took the approach of mat leave, in the sense that people go, they do put their roles on hold and they come back and sort of just tried to figure it out from there. And then as we were going away, so that all got approved and it was amazing and I was shocked and very, very grateful and very humbled. And it was wonderful. And we like started by this stage, by the time it got all approved, it was only 3 months before our scheduled departure time. So selling everything and running around like absolute nutters. It was a very hectic 3 months of our lives. And this was the end of 2018. And then we went, oh, well we don't have a lot in savings. How are we going to do this financially? And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to need to work kind of part-time anyway to support us through. And I thought, you'd probably do some, we could work in some bars or whatever it is that people tend to do to pay for their travels around the world. Like, if backpackers can do it, we can do it too. That was kind of my approach to it. And I mentioned that to work, and then we worked out that there was work that needed to be done that was outside of the normal scope of what we were asking other people to do. And I said, look, if I'm going to work anywhere, it's going to be for you guys. For first and foremost, my preference will always be to support this organization. And it worked out. Yeah, it came together. And so I did a couple of days here and there, and a few things happened, and I worked a little bit more and then dropped back. But it was wonderful to be able to step out and do something very different, but also maintain those relationships and the networks Mitch was talking about, as well as the work from home as we went through. And yeah, it was. And then I came back. We actually came back a little bit early because we did run out of money. But that was part of the decision that Mitch was really struggling with when we were making the decision to go away, was how do we come back? And ultimately we realized that we sell everything. We can buy a new couch when we come home. And if we're absolutely $0 to our name, 42 cents in the bank account, we are very fortunate and very lucky to have friends and family that we could crash on their couch for, a couple of weeks. And we know that you can get jobs if we didn't have employer relationships. And how long would it take to realistically get back to where we were?
There's a concept that I'm sure you've heard of Tim Ferriss.
No.
4-Hour Work Week. No.
Fascinating. Definitely worth a read. It's a great book.
Yeah,
possibly terrifying. Also,
he came very early in the self-help, minimized business type scenario, and sold a book everywhere. I caught that when I was about 22. I think I first read it. I heard about it and immediately drove down to the bookstore and bought a copy, because a 4-hour work week, that sounds amazing to me. And so it took a long time to absorb the messages that were in that. And one that we only really truly came to embrace when all this happened was the concept of what's the worst that's going to happen. And you think about a scenario where what we did was literally sold everything. We had very few possessions left in Australia. We were living out of our suitcases, and we went overseas. And the thing that really got us to that point was the concept of what is the worst that can happen. And the worst that can happen is we end up back in Brisbane working again. And Jenn had built such a successful image and network and everything like that, that she came back to Brisbane without a job. If CA turned her down and said, no, you got to quit, she'd get another job. It'd be a matter of weeks, and then she'd have another role. And I would find something to do, even if it went back to making coffee or mowing lawns, if the things I did didn't pan out. And we're back where we were.
Yeah.
And all we'd had was experience in the meantime. All we'd had was growth. So the worst that could happen was us being better versions of ourselves.
And
being broke.
Being a bit poorer. But, you don't get anywhere without sacrifice. And I think, we've spoken a bit about networks and, integral people, I suppose, in your life. And Mitch, you got the role that you're doing at the moment, or what you're doing for your career, came about from just somebody mentioning that somebody needed somebody in the digital marketing space. So, which I found just, amazing how you've just gone from, your degree to gyms to corporate, and then you've just become someone that's involved in digital marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So we went actually for a holiday in 2017. I think we went 2 weeks for a friend's wedding overseas, and I didn't have a job when we left for that trip. I didn't have any work, and I came back and didn't have anything. I'd been mowing lawns previously for about 18 months, and that had brought in money, but it was nothing exciting. I was just a lawnmower.
Which is perfectly fine.
Which is perfectly fine, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. How about that? And I came back and went, no, I'm not going to go back to that comfort. I'm not going to fall back into that groove. I'm going to progress. I don't want to be here. I want to go forwards. And I'd been trying to get like admin roles or anything for 18 months before that. Like, I hadn't chosen to go into lawn mowing. I'd done it because I needed to have an income. And that whole time I was trying to get jobs and just never hearing back. Or whenever I did hear back, it was, sorry, you haven't got any experience. Sure, you've got a degree, but you don't have any experience. So I came back from that holiday and went, I need some experience. And I was at my local gym, my MMA gym, and I overheard the owner say that he was swamped with paperwork and trying to get some different things done rather than just teaching classes. And I literally just walked up and said, I'll do it. I'll come in, for a few hours each week, and for free. I just need the experience. Let's make it happen. And from day one doing that, a lot of my focus was on trying to get and retain clients. So more people for the gym, which is what gyms do. They need members. And I was doing a bit of basic admin, but not nearly as much as I thought I was going to be doing. And I was just focusing on ways to get people in. I was arranging for signs to go out on streets and trying to run open days and all this kind of stuff. And on the phones, calling people, literally following up old leads. And I did that for 3 months. I was working anywhere from like 10 to 20 hours. I think there was a couple of 30-hour weeks. I did get the nice kickback in the fact that being at the gym all the time, I got to spend a lot of time with the coaches, and I was kind of really happy, but I wasn't making any money. I was definitely relying on Jenn at that time point. And I got to late December, and I said to the owner, I need to go and actually find a job because I need to get paid. And he said, well, I'll give you one. It'll be 20 hours a week, but you can be like the national franchise manager, which to me just sounded insane at the time. But he said, you're doing the stuff that I need done for all of the gyms that he oversaw. Because he had 4 gyms at the time. And that was an interesting experience in growing up, because I went from nothing to being responsible for the success of 4 different businesses owned by 4 different people all in one go. And I wasn't solely responsible, no way, no how. They had their own businesses, but I had to help. And I'd done a lot of marketing in my undergrad when I was doing the dual degree. And I just leaned into that knowledge and a lot of basic business sense, I guess, making sure things are clean, making sure you're keeping your invoices, making sure you're structuring things rather than having a very organic business. We met mixed success. That was a case, I believe, of both the dynamic of the owner and the franchisees and myself, and a lot of different factors that were going on at the time.
There were some timing.
Yeah, there was definitely timing issues, but that I sunk into that and started going for it. I flew to Perth to see one of the gyms, looking after the gyms locally, and that kind of all just snowballed, which was amazing for me. I think the main issue was I still wasn't being paid very consistently, but that I was overlooking that in the fact that of the excitement of what I was doing and the fact that it was giving me opportunity. So I was getting paid here and there, and it was always a bit of a battle to get that money, but it was what it was. I was making it work. And during the course of that, I became responsible for doing all of the marketing for the gyms. Got signed up to a course regarding that stuff. started doing that course, which was excellent, learning about Facebook ads and Google advertising and everything, and just kind of learning from all of that and experimenting. I was progressing through that, and the person I was leaning on to do all the kind of graphics work for those ads and the videos and that kind of thing was another guy who worked with the head owner. And basically, I got to know him very well, and he was doing his own business at that point. He'd separated himself from the gym. He'd used the gym to kind of build himself up, but he'd separated to do his own graphics design business, which he'd had going for a long time, admittedly, but it really started to take off. And it was 2018, September. I kind of let it be known in my network that I was trying to find some kind of work that would allow me to work while traveling, because I was going one way or another. I was leaving, and he reached out and said, "Hey, I know you've been doing a lot of ads. I'm working with someone doing all their videos and that kind of thing, and they were talking to me about getting ads done because they don't really know anything about themselves. Do you reckon you can fake it until you make it?" And I went, "What do you mean?" But I understood exactly what he meant, in the fact that I was going to have to portray myself as a person with a great deal of experience. It's not to say that I didn't have a great deal of success with him immediately, nearly. We went straight into launching a gym for him. And he's still my number one customer to this day, if you're listening somehow. But yeah, it's kind of, okay, this is completely new. I've never worked for an outside organization. I'd never worked remotely like that. I'd never been involved in a team more than one. And I just dove into it and said, let's give it a go. Went and met with the client, had a chat with him, impressed him enough that he signed a contract, and off we went. And so by the time I left to go overseas, the start of January, I had 3 clients from none in September, and was managing to make enough money to be useful. And that was that. So bought an expensive laptop and went overseas. A laptop that I couldn't super afford, but that was the case, and just went with it and gave it a go. And again, living by that philosophy of what's the worst that's going to happen? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And from there, it's just snowballed and grown, and to the point that it worked. It worked very well. It was one of those things that it grew a bit by itself while we're overseas, but it did honestly take off once I got home. Once we came back, I needed that time of sole focus to really put into it, and the time to meet a lot of prospective clients, because a lot of people weren't comfortable with dealing with people completely remotely at that point. I'm sure that's changed a lot now, probably begrudgingly for a lot of people, but it's state of affairs. But yeah, we got back in September last year, in 2019, and it just snowballed from there, and went from a relatively small business with 4 or 5 clients to dealing with big ones very quickly, and a lot more. And then, straight into COVID. So I had 3 months of stellar, crazy success, talking about hiring employees and everything like that. That's how far it got. And then straight into COVID, and lost all of my clients. Well, didn't lose. All of my clients went on pause in a matter of 48 hours. But we're back now, and I'm back to tearing my hair out trying to keep up.
And back to hiring people.
Yeah, back to hiring people.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's awesome.
So it's so interesting for me even to have watched from an analytical perspective. There was so much sort of ambling kind of through, and no, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. No, I don't know what I'm doing at all. And then all of a sudden, for it all just to hit, and to suddenly there be a business. So there was almost like a mad scramble to get a business registered and all of the things to be able to service the clients that were suddenly magically there. Mm-hmm. And I think it all clicked with, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier in regards to your personality and your goals and motivations, and what Mitch was referring to earlier around that kind of needing to see what the outcome is, and being able to see like that path to get there and then get to that outcome. That just really worked for him in this space. But if you'd asked him even 2 or 3 months before this all just happened and all of a sudden you had all these clients, is social media or digital advertising your thing?
No, I honestly to this day still hate social media. I use it to talk to people, like as a messenger program and for work. I'm not a prolific social media user at all. It's like I was saying earlier on, learning to know yourself. Even looking back at it now and still coming to grips with how everything's worked out, and the fact that I can actually focus on this job, this work enough to get it done, because I have massive procrastination issues and ability to focus on any one thing for a particular long length of time. It's ended up being this very interesting mix of responsibility that I feel to my clients, knowing that their businesses and the money that they're spending with me and with advertising is my responsibility. I matter, and it's going to make a difference one way or another for them and their families. And then also the fact that, you know, you can see the numbers. You can put something up one day and 3 days later go and have a look and see if it's working. And that really fits in with that thing for me of needing to see my work and to be able to know that it's doing something and feeling that sense of accomplishment.
Absolutely. It sounds like that completely fits what you've been seeking for all that time, that instant outcome, the instant, you know, being able to see that instant success.
Is definitely the longest I've ever maintained a single working environment or job or anything. I've never worked in one thing as long as I've worked in this. And that's just like industries, full stop.
And I think what your journeys have shown is that you really need to be able to sort of come into yourself. You need to be able to grow and to learn and learn how to learn and back yourself is
Yes.
the message that I've got and networking. Obviously, networking has been huge for both of you, just to be able and to put yourself out there, because that's not easy to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and, you know, look for things and give you time and things like that. So, you know, I think that your journey has been absolutely amazing. I wish that we'd have more time to talk about your actual travels. I've watched a few of your YouTube clips and love it. And I believe that's your mum in there, Jen, and she's gorgeous.
It's my mum,
in all
isn't
the comment sections.
Mum's hilarious.
So I will leave a link to all your socials on our website. So I just really wanted to say thank you so much to Mitch and Jen for joining me today. But before we leave, I just wanted to ask you both, what would you do differently if only you knew?
What would we do differently if only we knew? I think it's a tough one, because we did say that we appreciate the learnings that we have gained across the way. But I think you mentioned it just before about backing yourself. But I think it's almost trusting, because there were a lot of things that fell into place in one way or another because of choices that we made that ended up where we are now. But there was a lot of stress and anxiety and fear and all of those things during that time, and perhaps a little bit more of that trust and gaining that support and building that support network around us as well, that would allow us to get there. I think overall, if I had one piece of advice to give myself or give other people that are either, you know, really early in their career, finishing high school, starting university, or, you know, wanting to do a career change or whatever it is, it would be that never get complacent about trying to work out what it is that is right for you, and working out what you like and what your goals are, your motivation, what interests you, what you could actually see yourself loving and enjoying and spending time on. So never get complacent about learning those things, and also learning skills to keep progressing forward. But also, it is very easy to become overwhelmed with the pressures and the stresses and it might seem like everyone has an opinion on what you're doing, or everyone is asking you, what are you doing with your career? What are you going to do with your life? And that you feel like you need to have an answer for that. And you don't. it is okay to not have the answer right now. You can change your mind, you can change degrees, even as scary as it is, and pick those things up and learn. And we talked a little bit about the fact that careers change so much at the moment. Jobs, there's new ones that are coming up all the time. Somehow, some way, as long as you're still trying to figure out, still actively thinking about it, still actively working on yourself in those transferable skills. And if you don't know what a transferable skill is, Google it, because it's then you will get there. And to have confidence, and don't let it overstress you too much. Eustress is good. Stress is bad.
Couldn't agree more.
I personally think, looking back to myself, I was talking to myself, and it's interesting. So I'm talking to my brother, nearly in the same situation I was. Don't be scared to just test things out. Like, just go and give everything a go. You know, if you have an interest in traveling, go travel for a month. If you considering maybe being a dive instructor, go see if you can work for a week on a dive boat with someone. Like, ask and put yourself out there and try things out. You just don't know. I would have much more aggressively researched and tried to find out what is out there, because the things I've heard about now that you can do for work, and I'm like, really?
People
That's a job?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, like, it's
Saying
just
yes.
it's just out there. And the same token, don't be led astray by a promise that's too good. You know, there's a lot of these, oh, you just got to do this thing and you'll be fine. And I think I see that a lot of people trying to be streamers on Twitch or become Instagram famous or something like that. They don't understand that that's really hard work. It's not just taking a couple of photos every day and going for it. As soon as you try to make a business out of it, it's really hard work. So just explore everything.
That's fantastic insight, and I really have enjoyed speaking with you both today. So thank you, Mitch and Jen, for joining the If Only You Knew podcast. And if you want to know more about Jen and Mitch, check out their bios on our website, ifonlyyouKnew.com.au. And I will definitely be putting a link to your YouTube and your Instagram, so everybody can see about your travels. And we might need to have a part 2 about everything that you did while you were abroad. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. Thanks for having us. And like we said earlier, thank you so much for putting this together and interviewing people for the podcast. I think it's so important to be able to share these insights with people who want to know and want to learn.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, and been good for us as well, just to think about it all again.
For more information about our guests or our show, visit ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au.